Hey guys, welcome to my video series where we learn how to EQ everything, and today on the menu we have clean electric guitars. Let's do it. So before we jump into Logic, of course, the same principle as with every instrument previously applies, that the recording quality plays an essential role, of course. I have made a selection here of decently and well-recorded guitars, but of course, I also show these as an example for what I believe should be the minimum in terms of quality that you should record. In terms of tonality, playing, I mean, that's quite subjective, but the tone and the tonality, the frequency balance, it should be roughly in this ballpark. Now, guitars have a very unique problem that they have very strong resonant frequencies, as you'll see also in the analyzers later on. That has to do with the size of the speaker. Like in my Marshall, of course, we have a 12 inches and they have a resonant frequency at a very certain point. And combining that with the own resonant frequency, the own kind of unique curve of the amplifier itself, and then your guitar, you can end up with very lucky or very unlucky combinations. My amp is quite flat, it's quite neutral. Actually, I'm very pleased with its sound, and it works really well with Strats and also Les Paul style guitars and everything in between, really. But I have received guitars where I could tell, okay, this is a very unlucky combination of a guitar that sounds really bright with an amp that sounds really bright, a speaker cabinet that is very bright, and also a microphone that is maybe a bit too spiky, a bit too bright sounding, and then you end up with essentially like a 5 kilohertz peak and nothing else. So we want to avoid that. We want to choose a combination of ingredients where in the end, I can show you on the analyzer, you get like a curve like this. So you have a somewhat even distribution. If you play like a standard A chord, you get like a nice curve with evenly distributed frequencies between, I would say, 100 to 3-4 kilohertz. Like if you get a really high peak at 2, 3, 4K, not very good. If you get too many lows, of course, electric guitars don't have that many lows, or clean electric guitars are not meant to have that many lows, so that's also unnecessary. Then you should know that you're doing something wrong. In terms of settings, that you also notice that what sounds pleasant to you in the room never works when you're actually putting a mic in front of it and sounds good in a recording. In my particular case here, I usually have to crank the treble a lot higher than I would normally do when I'm just playing in the room for myself. And I usually have to reduce the lows quite a bit as well. So this is probably the biggest lesson or the most important information, that the way your guitar amp sounds in your room will most likely not sound good on a recording once you have a microphone up in front of the cabinet. This has proven right pretty much every time I recorded guitars. So the way I like to record guitars is actually, it's better to put the guitarist in the control room, you do your thing in the live room, and then they can hear in the control room how it actually translates, how it sounds. Let's not forget that we have a billion components, from cables, microphones, preamps, speakers, acoustics, everything affecting pretty much every part of how the sound develops and how it's distributed and how the frequencies combine, comp filters, phasing, etc., etc. And I've been going on for 3 minutes just ranting about recording, but basically you should get a good sound from the get-go, because you cannot fix it too much later in the EQ stage. And this is roughly, I'm going to show you now, how guitars should sound. So let's start with number one. So as you can see, this is exactly what I talked about. We have quite an even distribution between 100 to about 3, 4, 5K. Now there's a big drop off in the treble, but that is to be expected. But it's a nice even curve. We don't have, only in this muddy range, the 200, we have a bit of excess, which is also completely expected. This to me sounds like a Les Paul kind of sound, true. Hard to tell, probably a more British voiced amplifier, but at the end of the day it doesn't matter for us as mixers. We get what we get and we have to deal with it. So of course in the context of a mix, this has to sound and fit a certain way, but even before we think about that, there's always a little bit of cleanup to do. So first and foremost, I always cut the lows on clean guitars. There's really no need for anything below 70 or 100 hertz, and rarely even 200, to be honest. But at the same time, I do like to preserve the body of pretty much every instrument, or most instruments. Now here my first instinct would be to remove this muddy mid-range between the 2 and 500, but at the same time it's quite a dark sound. So first I want to see if I can set the treble the way I like it, and then see if that's maybe enough already to balance out with the low mids. Because if you don't have to reduce something, then it's probably better to preserve it. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, so the brightness is now pretty good, but I still do feel that there is this woofy resonance on the 200, so let's see if we can fix that. Now, this is a good starting point, but as always, I quite like a neutral sound. Neutral to me means that none of the negative attributes that we think of when thinking about sound jumps in your face immediately, like nasal, muddy, harsh, boxy. Any of these boomy, you know, any of these bad attributes, I don't want to hear them. I want a sound that sounds quite pleasant, neutral, flat, without any excess of anything, really. That's just my personal approach. And you know, a lot of it is part of the character of the tone. So even if I remove the unpleasantness of a sound, the character of this sound will still remain. It will still remain a Les Paul. There's no way I'm going to turn this into a Stratocaster with a completely different tone, right? So here what I hear is a little bit of the nasal 2K that I want to get rid of. So can you hear how just this little dip made it more pleasant? It's a bit less piercing, and of course once you compress it, you boost it, and blah blah blah, you put it into a mix. This will make a huge difference in how this guitar affects you. It will not pierce your ears, and you can actually make it louder if you want, or you can just listen to the whole mix louder because it's still pleasant, you know? So that's a very good thing, I believe. Let's have a look at the before and after. Now there's still a little bit of that pointiness here, but I cannot reduce all of it, unfortunately, and I wouldn't want to, because then the whole tone just disappears. So you have to find that balance where it's better, it's sweeter, it's less bothering, but it doesn't change the sound completely. Let's have a look quickly what happens if I remove it altogether. So now what I hear is that we have this huge gap in this range. So there's something missing, and we lost a little bit of the character of the tone. So I think what we had previously, just a 3-4 dB reduction, is more than enough. And of course, keeping into consideration that I boosted the whole thing by what's that, 6 dB almost. So of course, I'm basically just compensating for what I did here, right? I boosted 6 dB, I boosted this unwanted resonance a bit too much, so I'm reducing it so it is tucked in nicely. Let's have a look at the next one. Okay, again, quite a nice recording, quite an even tone. As we can hear, it has the same kind of problem again, just not enough treble, a little bit of a boomy low end, but otherwise it's quite good. This is this is probably a Telecaster or a Stratocaster on the neck pickup. But again, it doesn't matter to us mixers too much what it is, we just have to make it sound good, while of course ideally preserving the character that we have been given by the client. Now here the boomy low end, this low end almost overshadows the whole tone. So basically all I hear is this, but not enough of the presence. So this would not work in a mixing context for me. And you see, just with this little reduction around 230, we managed to get rid of the really unwanted boomy muddy tone. We still preserve the fundamental, the foundation of the tone, which is below it between 100 and 200, and already the treble seems a little bit sweeter, but we still need a little bit more. When it comes to making boosts like the one I just did here, is the secret is to make the boost, to place the boost high enough in the frequency that it doesn't do the very obvious tonal changes, right? If you boost above 2-3K, then you avoid getting the harsh nasal tone. So here I just wanted more kind of air, more top end, more sparkle to the sound without getting a lot of the boxy nasal mid-range. Let's see what happens if I move this boost down. You will hear that the character of the guitar starts to change completely. Especially if I make it narrow. And very important, of course, mix with your ears. Visually, this might make no sense. I mean, what is this? It's like a ridiculously white bell that could even be a shelf, to be honest. It is reaching down almost to 100 Hertz, but what I hear is completely different to what this is actually showing me. What I hear is an added top end, a louder tone, of course, because we're boosting quite a bit of the essence, the whole tone. But I don't get any of the negative side effects, and yeah, this is working fine. So yeah, we cannot mix visually. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. So this is a very interesting recording because even though it's playing really high notes, we get a lot of really bad low end here. This just happens. This is just how life is sometimes. And this is something we definitely want to get rid of because it doesn't contribute to the sound at all, not even a little bit. What this will do is it will add up with your bass guitar, your toms, your kick, your piano, and every instrument that might have a low rumble, even unintended low end, like on hi-hats you find sometimes, and even tambourines you find sometimes, like a 20 Hertz rumble because of recording, DC, electricity problems, all of that stuff. So we don't want that. This will just put strain on your speakers. It's completely unnecessary. So this is something you want to get rid of quite aggressively. And tonally it makes no difference almost. Like I don't really hear a major difference by cutting this off versus keeping it. So again, we are facing the same kind of problem, just not enough top end. We had a new problem here with this unwanted low end rumble, but the rest is quite good. It's, you know, not a very difficult thing to EQ. What you just want is a bit more top end here, so it has a nice sparkle in the mix. Of course, I said in every video so far that we mix quite bright. We listen to quite bright music these days, and this is the kind of tone you would want. And ironically, this is also probably how the guitarist would hear his guitars in the room, you know, with this boost. So I'm happy with this. Let's have a look at the next one. Okay, something with effects through a Leslie, according to the name. This sounds really cool. I quite like it. I love Leslies. Here we have the same kind of problem. We have this unwanted low end, which we'll just get rid of. But here we have a new little challenge. And I wonder if you can hear it. Put it down in the comments now. I'm just going to play it, and you can pause the video if you want. So especially in this section, what I hear, and put your comments down below right now what you think I heard and if you have heard anything. What I have heard is a whistle around 2-3K. Let's have a listen. So it's a whistle exactly at 2.69, my favorite frequency. And the reason why this happens is because it's exactly the kind of resonances that I talked about in the beginning of the video. Every guitar, every amp has a specific resonant frequency, and I can tell you right now that this frequency is pretty much always between 2.5 to roughly 3.5 kilohertz. In extreme cases, bigger Mesa Boogie amplifiers, active pickups, etc. Like if circumstances really come together, then you can get it sometimes at 5 kilohertz. But most often than not, this resonant frequency is at 3.1 kilohertz. And now that I told you, you will hear it everywhere, including in some very prominent records. I actually made myself a version of American Idiot with 3.1 reduced because it was just killing me. It was all over the whole album. And it's a much better sounding record to listen to like that. Anyway, so this whistle is something that I like to take out of guitars pretty much always, because it distracts from the sound a lot and it can become very piercing. Now this is it. Of course, because of the reverb, it's not possible to get rid of it completely, the built-in reverb that is with this sound, but you can manage it quite a bit. I like the low mids like that. I don't want to tweak it too much. The notes, the fundamentals are sustaining quite nicely. They deliver quite a nice tone. So I'm quite happy with this. Of course, we have the usual top-end issue, but that's a quick fix now, as we have learned. Now, just as a side note, in very extreme cases, I would even use a dynamic EQ, something like the Brainworks one, which is really good for this kind of stuff, to really, in a targeted way, remove this frequency, but only every time it occurs. You know what? I'm just going to show you. So here we have my favorite dynamic EQ for these kind of choices, and this is not sponsored content, by the way. I'm not getting any money for saying this, but this actually works really nicely. So I have a factor of 1.0, which is basically my ratio, and I'm gonna solo that, and let's see. So as you can see here by the action of this plugin itself, it only removes this frequency whenever it goes above the threshold, which I have set. And I really love using this for these kind of issues. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 of this in vocals, on vocals as well, guitars, pretty much every instrument that can have these resonant problems. I love it. I love this processor a lot. It's fantastic. It just gets rid of problem frequencies in such an amazing way. Last one. Okay, not that exciting. Let's get rid of the low end here, boost the top. That's it really. So as you can see, you shouldn't be too aggressive with your EQ. Now I know that 8 dB of boost might seem quite aggressive, but what I mean is you don't want to affect the essence, the tone of the guitar too much. So I'm not going in and going, you know, crazy curves and crazy reductions at 1K, 2K. Basically this range between 100 and 2, 3, 5K, I want to keep as intact as possible. I want to boost everything that's above that to get more presence, and I want to manage everything that's below that to avoid boom and unwanted low end. And then the maximum you saw me do earlier was the little bit of reduction either in the harsh resonant frequencies, but even there I'm quite careful. The dynamic EQ, of course, is the best way to do it because it preserves all the rest and just removes the problems when there is one. And of course, the low mid-range mud that appears every now and then. So I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. And if you want to learn more about mixing and mastering and production, recording, just hit me up. I do one-on-one classes with you and only with you. I do 1 session or 3 sessions or more if you want to work on a really targeted problem, or if you want to do the whole broad masterclass with me where we cover all the basics and all the essentials you need so that you don't have to watch any of these tutorials again. My promise is that I'll not try to sell you plugins, I'm not going to try to sell you templates and bundles and any of that nonsense that you don't really need. My promise is that you will understand the basics and the foundations of mixing and production so much more that you can just figure out things for yourself and come up with your own methods to develop your own sound and your own style. So I hope you found this video helpful. I see you in the next one. Until then, happy mixing. Bye bye.